Okay. Let's gonna react to some things. And yeah. Gonna react to some videos. That's it. Okay. Okay. Jesus, the Wi-Fi, the connection is terrible. What the hell's wrong with it? Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna watch this video and yeah.
Would Neil Armstrong or Joan of Arc make a better Green Lantern? And what about the orange rings? Was Pablo Escobar greedier than Genghis Khan? Yet again, I'll be explaining the powers and rules of every major Lantern Corps from DC Comics, and picking 3 ideal candidates for each, every one a major figure from real-world history. I'll cover the whole emotional spectrum.
I think Joan of Arc should be the Blue Lantern, to be honest. I don't know. I'll pick Red Lantern for like Hitler, Orange Lantern I don't know who, Yellow Lantern for Genghis Khan or Draco of Essence or something. You know what? I'll speak it.
Plus the white and black cores of life and death. Oh,
I'll
by the way, my final pick for the Green Lanterns is unlike anything else I've ever done in one of these videos before, so definitely stick around for that. But that's enough intro. Right off the top of the emotional spectrum are the Red Lanterns of Rage.
Okay, these are my 3 picks. Okay, I'll pick like Queen Boudica, which is like, you know, she actually like, you know, rebelled against the Romans for, for I don't know. She rebelled against the Romans for vengeance, for vengeful purposes. I'll show you a video later. And Vlad the Impaler, of course, you know, the guy who like, you know, impaled a ton of Ottoman soldiers. That guy. And and my final pick is Hitler because, you know, that guy was pissed after Germany was humiliated. The reason why I didn't pick Hitler for, you know, for the Yellow Lantern instead is because, you know, I feel like his like motivations come from rage more so than fear, you know. Like, so I think the Red Lantern fits him better.
Red Lantern Corps are powered by the crimson light of anger, the most violent and self-destructive emotion in the spectrum. Their rings grant flight, durability, and hard light constructs like the other cores, and they fundamentally change the body of the wielder as well. A red ring burns out your blood, replacing it with molten plasma, pumped through your veins by the ring itself. That plasma can be spewed out in a corrosive stream, eating through enemy constructs and armor. But if you remove the ring, you die instantly, your heart no longer able to pump real blood. In short, to wield the red light, you need a rage so deep that you give up everything, your body, your life, even your soul, for the chance to destroy that which you hate. My first pick would gladly have made that choice. Few names evoke rebellion like Spartacus, a gladiator in...
Oh yeah, oh wow. I think I want... I actually would choose him for a Green or Blue Lantern instead, because like Spartacus is like, I feel like, you know, I'm not really I don't really know much about him. I think he's someone that would like incite like something that would give up like will, I don't know. I feel like I feel like for the type of things he's fighting for, I feel like he's more like a sign of hope for the slaves he was, you know, fighting alongside him. And, you know, I also think that Will also fits him better because, you know, of how far he's willing to, you know, fight for what he believes.
Fight for the amusement of Rome, Spartacus' life was built on humiliation and brutality. But where others were broken under the yoke, he turned his rage into a weapon. When he escaped the gladiatorial school of Capua in 73 BC, he didn't run and hide. He gathered thousands of fellow slaves and launched a rebellion that terrified the Roman Republic to its core. Unlike the cold calculation of a politician or the patient endurance of a strategist,
Creators, I built these 3 apps to run my business just using prompts with base 44.
Spartacus's campaign was fueled by righteous fury. At the masters who whipped him, the crowds who cheered at his suffering, the empire that treated human lives as disposable entertainment. The Red Lantern Corps isn't about justice, it's about anger, so fierce that it blinds you to the cost. Spartacus embodied that. His revolt was doomed from the start, and he knew it the entire time, but he didn't care. He fought anyway, driven by rage so powerful it shook one of the greatest empires in history. If a Red Ring had found him on that battlefield, Spartacus would have burned Rome itself to ash. My next pick is remembered as the greatest swordsman in Japanese history.
Musashi.
Disciplined Ronin, undefeated in over 60 duels, Miyamoto Musashi.
Musashi.
Beneath these samurai's mythic calm was a storm. He was born in the late 16th century, and his early years, especially, were defined by not serenity, but violence and anger. At just 13, he fought his first duel and beat his opponent to death with a wooden sword. He became infamous for his sheer brutality. He would show up late to duels to enrage his opponents, killing them in humiliating fashion, and carrying himself with a wild, almost feral energy that other samurai saw as unrefined and dishonorable. But he disagreed. Musashi's rage was the simmering fury of a man who lived for the kill. He often fought with both hands, wielding two blades at once, carving through opponents with reckless abandon. His duels were spectacles of violence. His name spread fear across the land. Red Lanterns don't necessarily need a political motivation or some sad backstory. They need to embody rage as a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's what I didn't really think about that.
His disdain for convention and his fiery spirit made him exactly that. Later in life, he wrote the Book of Five Rings, where he outlined his philosophy: domination through struggle. One quote in particular is exactly in line with
I didn't really think about that, to be honest.
Abandon your own body, but you must preserve your honor. If Musashi had worn a red ring, he would have been an unstoppable hurricane of blood.
No, this guy's just angry, man. He doesn't even have a sad backstory. This guy's just pissed.
Represents rebellion and
just like
Musashi,
anger.
Rage against the self. Boudica is pure
Yep.
vengeance. The queen of the Iceni tribe in Roman Britain. Boudica saw
like I
the
said.
world destroyed in a single stroke. When her husband, a client king of Rome, died, the Romans annexed his kingdom. They flogged Boudica publicly, assaulted her daughters, and trampled her people under their boots. From that moment on, her life became a Red Lantern story. She was driven entirely by her rage. Her uprising against Rome in 60 AD was nothing short of apocalyptic. Boudica's army slaughtered tens of thousands, burning entire cities to the ground, including London itself. She wanted Rome to feel the same humiliation and agony that she had endured. That is the essence of the red light. Anger so all-consuming that it ceases to care for survival. Boudica's rebellion eventually collapsed, her forces scattered and destroyed, and she either killed herself or was captured soon after. But in that brief, blazing uprising, she was the embodiment of fury. A red ring would have fed on her vengeance, amplifying her wrath until Britain burned brighter than the sun in the midnight sky. Moving on, the Orange Lantern Corps is not actually a corps at all.
I don't really have any suggestion for this. Like, I could just suggest some businessman or something, but I really do. I'm not really. I don't know if they really truly embody it. Like, I really like. I feel like someone who embodies the Orange Lantern should have like a stronger should have like something way stronger than just being a businessman or something, you know.
It's to be hoarded. To wear an orange ring is to surrender.
I mean, I have like a few ideas, like Alexander the Great. I mean, Genghis Khan fits this quite well. I think someone who has like wants to like have a lot of land or something.
Avarice. A greed so
I bet Alexander
that
could
rewrites
fit
your
this,
mind,
to be honest.
making you paranoid that everything in the universe belongs to you and everyone else is trying to steal it. Instead of comrades in arms, an Orange Lantern fights alone, wielding an army of light constructs made from every soul they've ever slain. One man, one ring, one insatiable hunger. The more they kill, the bigger their collection. And the more they own, the more desperate they become to own even more than that. As the wielder collects more and more, the orange light twisting their mind down a path of paranoia, they
4 to
lash
5.
out at anyone who might threaten the horde.
Okay.
I can't think of many figures in modern history that embody avarice like Pablo Escobar.
Oh.
The Colombian drug lord rose from petty crime to become one of the wealthiest men on earth. His Medellin cartel controlling nearly 80% of the global cocaine trade at its height towards the middle of the 20th century. Escobar's empire was so vast that he literally ran out of places to store all of his money. Billions of dollars hidden in warehouses, buried in fields, even rotting away in in the walls of farmhouses. His accountants estimated that rats ate nearly $2 billion in cash each year, and Escobar didn't even notice. But the Orange Ring would be drawn to more than just his greed for wealth. Escobar wasn't content to rule a cartel. He wanted to rule all of Colombia. He bribed politicians, bombed government buildings, and assassinated anyone who stood in his way. Even when he was elected to parliament, it wasn't enough. Ultimately, he wanted legitimacy, power, recognition, everything. At his core, Escobar was a
I didn't know that.
of desire, devouring more
Like
money,
he got,
more
I didn't know he got elected to
blood.
parliament.
The Orange Light would find a perfect host in him, turning his paranoia and obsession into an endless army of constructs made from all the enemies he murdered along the way. And as Escobar was the face of greed in the criminal underworld, John D. Rockefeller was greed made respectable. The founder of Standard Oil in 1870, Rockefeller.
Yeah, that's what I mean by businessman. I meant this guy like John D. Rockefeller.
History by building a corporate empire that devoured its competition. He bought out rivals, crushed independence with ruthless price wars, and bent the American government to his will until the oil flowed only through his hands. He was insanely rich, a titan of industry whose fortune would be worth hundreds of billions today. The Orange Ring doesn't care whether you hoard money, land, power, people, even something simple like food or music. It cares about the desire that drives you to hoard in the first place. Rockefeller's obsession with control fits that mold perfectly. To him, his competitors didn't take up space in his mind like a rival would. They were thieves, stealing what was rightfully his. Every barrel of oil in the world belonged to him. Every pipeline, every refinery, every drop of wealth the industry could produce. The Ring would corrupt that obsession even further, pushing him to treat not just oil, but all of creation as his personal property. With an army of orange constructs behind him, Rockefeller would embody the nightmare of monopoly, a universe where everything and everyone belongs to him. But even Rockefeller's greed pales when we put it in.
I feel like he's I'm not really sure if it's greed. I feel it's more like ambition or something. I'm not really sure if
Perspective. Consider Genghis Khan, the 12th century.
This guy feels more like a yellow lantern than an orange lantern, to be honest. Like I feel like he controls his things, controls through fear rather than him embodying greed.
Conqueror whose greed stretched farther than any empire before or since. Born as Temujin, he rose from the poverty of the Mongolian steppe to forge the largest contiguous empire in human history. To Genghis, conquest was ownership. Every enemy he defeated, he absorbed them, their land, their people, their culture, folding it all into the ever-expanding horde. Cities were razed, kingdoms were broken, and the survivors were added to his empire like spoils of war, and that included the women. Something like 1 in every 200 people today is a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. I can think of no other way a man could more explicitly claim the world as his own than to fill it with his descendants. What makes Khan such a perfect Orange Lantern isn't just the scale of his empire, but the hunger that fueled it. No matter how much he conquered, it was never enough. The Mongol armies moved like fire across the continent, devouring everything.
No, I feel like he embodies fear more rather than greed.
What it hates, but an Orange Lantern claims what it desires. Genghis Khan
to be honest,
was the ultimate claimant, a man
you know, fear over avarice.
In years and battles, but also in
I mean, that's just like the aspect of him, aspect of like his empire. Like many of the empire, many the rulers of his empire, of like his empire wants to. They have this ambition of trying to keep expanding it or something, like. They really do enjoy conquering. You know? Like, it's like, basically for them it's basically how far can we push this empire, how big can we make this empire. It's basically what it means to them. Yeah. Oh, white hot incarnate. I didn't know about the white hot here. And of course, Empire of the Great Khan. Or it's like the Yuan dynasty.
That he bent to his will. The Orange Ring would love him, crowning him with an army of spectral Mongol warriors, each one a construct made from the countless souls who fell before.
I feel like he embodies fear more because of how he basically how much atrocities he committed to instill fear in his enemies.
And as we discuss Conquerors, there will definitely be some overlap with our next core. The Sinestro core is powered by the golden light of fear. Yellow Lanterns thrive on dominance. Their rings make you terrifying. The better you are at instilling fear in those around you, the stronger it will be. A yellow ring automatically generates constructs born from the deepest fears of your victims. So if you fear spiders, the ring will conjure an endless swarm. If you fear death, it will manifest in forms that embody it. The ring weaponizes your imagination and your nightmares. When choosing a good pick for the Sinestro Corps, I need to consider which historical figures were, frankly, the scariest. So I didn't necessarily
Stalin.
weigh in kill count or the size of an empire that they controlled, but specifically their conception of
Stalin.
the ability to harness fear
Okay.
to manipulate others.
My picks are Genghis Khan, Stalin, and Draco of Essence. I mean, Draco essentially invented this idea of using fear and martial punishment as a tool for order in society. He essentially like created the idea of like fearing the law, of respecting the law because you fear it. Like he will essentially, Draco will basically like sentence like any criminal to death, basically. Even if you commit like small crimes like loitering, all those, he'll sentence you to death. It is punished. Every crime is punishable by death under him. Yeah, and also Stalin, he's like he used fear to like control the Soviet Union. He used fear and paranoia to control the Soviet Union to retain his own power. Yeah. And also Genghis Khan, since he raised cities as a means for his to make his opponents submit.
Which leads me to my first honorable mention who almost made the list, Niccolo Machiavelli. It might seem kind of strange to place Machiavelli here. He wasn't a warlord or a conqueror. He didn't spread terror through armies or assassinations or anything, but what he did do was codify fear into a political weapon. In his infamous book, The Prince, Machiavelli argued that it is far safer for a ruler to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. He understood fear not as an accident of leadership, but as a tool, deliberate and controllable. He understood fear in ways many military leaders throughout history never had, but he never actually used it himself. If the Sinestro Corps ever needed, like, a tactician, Machiavelli would be their man. He might not wield the Yellow Ring himself, but his writings would serve as a handbook for every other Yellow Lantern in existence. He's like a philosopher of fear.
Yeah.
Fitting honorable mention and the perfect prologue to the tyrants who actually embodied his ideas. So, let's get to some of those tyrants. Ivan IV of Russia, remembered as Ivan the Terrible. He perfectly weaponized fear into a system of government. From the moment he crowned himself Tsar in 1547, Ivan sought to rule with absolute authority, and he understood that love or respect would never be enough. So he made himself a figure of terror. He established the Oprichnina, a reign of terror enforced by his personal guard, the Oprichniki, who dressed in black, carried severed dogs' heads as symbols of vigilance, and left trails of corpses wherever they went. They razed cities, executed nobles, and turned Russia into a kingdom ruled by whispers and dread. Fear was the cornerstone of his rule. That's why he was called the Terrible. He used paranoia like a blade.
I mean, terrible means fearsome.
Boyars, generals, even priests. It was very important that his allies feared him just as much as his enemies. Even his personal life was poisoned by this aura of terror.
Yeah.
In a fit of rage, he struck and killed his own son and heir, a crime that horrified the court and ensured his dynasty's weakness after his death. That act encapsulates Ivan's essence, a man so ruled by fear and suspicion that even his bloodline was sacrificed to it. If a yellow ring had descended into the Kremlin, Ivan would have slipped it onto his finger without hesitation. With it, his paranoia and cruelty would be magnified into a light that turned the whole world into his oprichnina.
Yeah.
Shifting now from Imperial Russia to the streets of Prohibition-era Chicago,
Ooh.
and you'll find another
Al
master
Capone.
of fear, Al
Yeah.
Capone. On the surface, Capone was a large,
feel like Stalin-
flashy suits, expensive
Stalin made
cigars,
more
and a
sense, to be
smile that
honest.
charmed the press. But beneath the glamour was a reign of intimidation that made him untouchable. He had this ability to transform his violence into legend, so that even when he wasn't pulling the trigger, the idea of crossing him was enough to keep rivals quiet. Capone ruled Chicago just like a Sinestro lantern rules a sector. He didn't need to fight every single battle, he just needed everyone to believe that resistance meant annihilation. His empire of speakeasies and gambling dens was built on that fear. Fear of humiliation, of ruin, of being made an example of. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre is the perfect illustration.
Yeah.
7 men lined up and gunned down in cold blood, both to remove his rivals from the game, but also to
Yeah.
send a message to the entire underworld. Even law enforcement struggled against him. Judges, police, and politicians found themselves compromised, intimidated, or outright controlled by Capone's presence. Everyone believed he was untouchable, and that belief is exactly what the Yellow Ring feeds on. With one, Capone's legend would transcend bullets and Tommy guns. His constructs would be the dread of citizens, the whispered fear of men who knew his name but prayed never
I
to
mean,
meet his
he's a
eyes.
pretty
In
typical
world where
mobster.
reputation is everything,
Like,
Capone
Orange- the
proved
Orange
that
and Yellow
fear
Lantern has a
could be the
pretty-
most
pretty-
valuable currency.
pretty,
So we know
like,
that
pretty
either
high
ruled through
overlap or
fear
something.
and Capone profited off
Yeah.
of fear, but Attila the Hun was fear incarnate. Known as, no joke, the Scourge of God, Attila commanded
Yeah.
the Huns in the 5th century, sweeping across Europe like a storm of horsemen. His armies left such devastation in their wake that entire cities surrendered without a fight at the mere rumor that he would be approaching.
I feel like
From
Genghis Khan
Romans
also
to the
fits that.
Goths to nearly every people of Europe, Attila was known as a force of nature. What set him apart was how he cultivated this myth of terror. His campaigns were all about breaking the will of nations. Survivors spread tales of massacres, of entire populations slaughtered, of rivers running red. His enemies began to believe that resistance was completely pointless. When Rome paid him tribute to keep him from invading, it wasn't because they lacked the soldiers needed to combat him. It was
Yeah.
because they lacked courage in the face of his legend. Attila often won most battles before the
Like,
first arrow was even loosed because fear itself fought on his side.
Is it
This
because
is the
like he's basically like Genghis Khan but
heart
for the
of
5th
Yellow
century?
Lantern ethos.
Like
A red
700
lantern
years-
may destroy his enemies,
700 years
but
older.
Yellow lanterns, they make their enemies destroy themselves. Attila mastered that principle. If he had worn a yellow ring, his horsemen would have been joined by spectral legions of nightmare. Against such a power, no empire, no city, no civilization could stand. The Yellow Lanterns are scary, man, which is why it's such a good thing we're protected by a force that can cut through that fear. The Green Lantern Corps,
Will.
the beating heart of the emotional spectrum. Unlike the other factions which thrive on consuming passions like rage or greed, the green light is about simple willpower.
Okay.
Quiet or loud, it is the ability to stare
Okay,
into
it's
the abyss,
interesting.
feel the fear
Like-
clawing at you, and step forward anyway.
Do I
Green
put
Lantern is
conquerors
passive
here?
Fear, not
Like,
by denying it,
I
but by
actually, like-
overcoming it.
I actually will put like Alexander, Napoleon, and I don't think that really fits the Green Lantern well. I don't think putting conquerors
That's why
here
willpower
works.
is so dangerous. It is a fleeting burst, but it can also be a constant grinding determination that breaks down walls and defies fate. Oa chooses its protectors from across the galaxy, and the Green Rings have always been the most iconic and powerful of them all. There are many great heroes throughout history who I think could work a Green Lantern ring, but these three are my top picks. Leonidas the First, King
Oh.
of Sparta, is remembered for a
Oh, I
single
know
battle,
this.
and yet that one battle secured his name for eternity. At Thermopylae in 480 BC, Leonidas led a force of just 300 Spartans and a few thousand allies.
I don't think it's 300
against
Spartans
Xerxes
though.
and
I
the
think it's
Persian
more than that.
Empire. By every measure, it was hopeless. Xerxes commanded an army of hundreds of thousands. Leonidas had a mountain pass, a handful of warriors, and the certainty of death. but he stood tall. He
Yeah.
knew from the start that he couldn't win the fight, but he chose to fight because surrender was simply not an option. That is the essence of the green light.
Yeah.
The Persian army towered over his men, and the Spartans' discipline and will was all they had to turn the narrow pass into a graveyard. For 3 days, they fought wave after wave after wave, holding back a tidal force with nothing but shields,
Yeah.
spears, and determination. Even when betrayed and surrounded, Leonidas fought to the end, ensuring his sacrifice bought enough time for the Greek city-states to rally together against Xerxes. What makes Leonidas a
Is
great
it really
Green
just
Lantern
300 people?
isn't just
I think
the
it's more
bravery
than
of
that.
stand, but the clarity of it. He knew death was certain. He knew fear would gnaw away at him.
I mean,
and
that
his
if
men,
death is
and he
certain,
chose
then how
to
he
face it,
last so
not
long?
for himself, but for the survival of his people. If a green ring had descended on Thermopylae, it would have been unmatched willpower, a light burning so bright
Yeah.
it defied an empire. Then, over 2,000 years later, after the Battle of Thermopylae, another figure looked into the void, not of an empire, but of the infinite universe. Neil Armstrong's journey to the moon in 1969
I don't know, Armstrong-
was a feat
Arm-
of science and engineering, but also
Armstrong
of
is like-
willpower. Every moment
I feel like any astronaut could fit this bill, to be
of the
honest.
Apollo
I don't feel
11
like
mission was
I don't feel like
steep
Armstrong is that
and
special.
incredible risk. Rockets
I
exploded on
agree
launch pads,
with
test
Leonardo,
pilots died in
Linus.
fiery crashes. The smallest
But-
miscalculation could leave astronauts stranded in orbit or drifting lifeless on the surface of the moon. Armstrong knew all of this, and he went anyway. When he descended the ladder and placed his boot on lunar soil, Neil Armstrong became the embodiment of what it means to overcome fear. He carried the
Yeah.
weight of a nation's expectations, the
I
pressure
feel like-
of the Cold War, and the knowledge that a single mechanical failure
I feel like this
may never
applies
return his home.
essentially applies to
His
every
voice
astronaut.
was calm, his steps were steady, and he had pure willpower. His words, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," are as Green Lantern as they come. It was about pushing through the unknown, carving a path where none had existed before.
I mean-
putting on a brave face to stand for and represent.
And
the
Neil Armstrong
advance
doesn't really-
of all of
I feel like
humanity.
he's like that applies to
Finally,
every
I had a
astronaut.
lot of different
Neil
figures
Armstrong
who
doesn't
could
really
have worn the
Neil Armstrong
fringe
doesn't really
of the
stand
ring.
out, to be honest.
But I
Honestly.
decided this spot wouldn't go to just one more member, but a core of their own. The tale of the 47 Ronin is one of the purest embodiments of will in human history. When their master, Lord Asano, was disgraced and forced to commit seppuku after striking a corrupt official, his restrainers were left masterless.
Yeah.
Ronin, bound by dishonor. In theory, their story should have ended there, but for 2 years, these 47 men plotted in silence, biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That patience and restraint is its own kind of willpower. It would have been easy to lash out immediately, to burn themselves up in a blaze of vengeance, but they resisted that temptation, enduring humiliation and poverty as Ronin while secretly preparing their retribution.
What the hell's a
Then, on
Ronin?
snowy night in 1703, they struck. They stormed the estate of the man who had ruined their lord, killed him, and carried his head to Asano's grave as an offering to him. Then, in perhaps their
What's Ronin supposed to be, anyways?
greatest feat of willpower, having fulfilled their duty to their master, they turned themselves in and accepted death with dignity and honor. The story
Yeah.
of the 47
And
Ronin
wow.
is so incredibly Green Lantern coded because it is willpower defined by loyalty. For 2 years, they overcame fear of discovery, fear of failure, fear of dishonor, all in service to a vow they refused to abandon. That kind of ironclad resolve is exactly what a green ring seeks out. If the oath of the Green Lantern is about never giving up
I've never-
fear,
I-
then the
40
oath of the 47
I usually associate 47 Ronin with that movie. Like, does that movie like actually follow the events quite well in
was
real
its
life?
human reflection. Each of them could have been chosen. Each of them would have burned with willpower, their spectral construct shaped by the bond that bound them to their master, even beyond death. And behind the blazing light of green is the softer, more gentle blue light of hope. The Blue Lantern Corps are the quiet miracle of the emotional spectrum. On their own, Blue Lanterns seem deceptively weak.
One of them
Blue
looks
Ring
like-
can
what does
provide
one of them
light,
look like a
defense,
freaking
and a
elephant?
healing light, but it can't generate
Okay.
offensive constructs the way green or yellow can. Hope by itself is inert, but when paired with willpower, its true strength emerges.
Like,
A Blue Lantern
I
standing
think
beside
I think
Green
Joan of Arc is a definitely a good candidate here.
supercharges them, making their construct stronger, sharper, almost
Hell, I think Neil Armstrong actually is a better fit for
Hope
Blue Lantern, to be
amplifies
honest.
will, because hope for a better outcome is the reason you choose to act with willpower in the first place. That's
Yeah.
why the Blue Corps are so special. They're not just about having hope within yourself, they're about inspiring that hope in others, becoming a beacon, a rallying point, a reason to keep moving when despair threatens to consume the world. Great Blue Lanterns are both incredibly hopeful themselves and
Yeah.
excellent in inspiring that hope within others. Just as blue light empowers the green light, those chosen to wield their rings often have a lot of overlap. Joan of Arc could
Yup,
easily
of course.
belong to the Green Lantern Corps. Her sheer willpower in leading armies, surviving imprisonment, and enduring torture would make her a natural candidate. But
Yup.
what sets her apart,
Yup,
what
Joan of
elevates
Arc.
her beyond will
Yeah.
into something brighter, was her hope. Joan rose beyond a simple soldier to become a symbol. At 17 years old, she heard the voice of God calling her to save France during the 100 Years' War. France was fractured, demoralized, and on the brink of collapse. Then came this teenage girl, clad in armor, proclaiming that God himself was on their side. And somehow, impossibly, people believed her. Joan rode into battle at Orleans and turned despair into triumph. She transformed weary soldiers into a force of faith, lifting their morale until the tide of war shifted. Her personal courage was immense, but what made her truly blue was the way she transmitted that courage into others, inspiring them to fight when all seemed lost. Even in death, her hope endured. Captured, put on trial, and condemned as a heretic, Joan never renounced any of her visions. As she was burned at the stake,
To be fair,
she cried out
The
to
reason
God.
why she was deemed as a heretic is because, like, she said that God spoke to her about France, and I don't think most of people would accept that back then. Like, I understand why it's seen as very controversial
until
back
her
then.
final breath.
Yeah.
To her enemies, it may have seemed like defiance, and to her followers, it was proof that the light she carried could not be extinguished. If a blue ring had descended into that square, it would have seen the embodiment of hope itself. A young woman who lit a fire in her people's hearts that still burns centuries later. And across the pond, there's another fantastic example of rallying hope and leadership. George Washington.
mean, George
was not
Washington
the most
is like-
brilliant general of his age. He lost more battles than he won. His army was poorly trained, poorly fed, and constantly on the verge of desertion. But Washington had something far more important than tactics. He carried the hope of a nation on his shoulders. During the darkest winters of the American Revolution, when soldiers' shoes were falling apart and morale was crumbling, Washington's presence was enough to keep the cause alive. At Valley Forge, disease and starvation cut through his ranks, and many argued the revolution was doomed. But Washington refused to let despair
Yeah.
ever take root. He spoke to his men, he stood with them in their suffering, and he embodied the belief that they were fighting for something larger than themselves. His leadership was rooted in the premise that liberty from British tyranny was possible, that against the world's most powerful empire, a ragtag collection of farmers and tradesmen could carve out independence.
Hope.
His victories, like the daring cross
Oh,
of
Nelson
Delaware
Mandela,
and the Triumph of
I forgot
Yorktown,
about this.
were proof that his hope
I'm
was
not sure
justified.
Washington
His
is.
exploits quickly became legend that spread across the colonies like wildfire. Every fight he survived, inspiring the burgeoning American forces to fight even harder. And then after victory, Washington's hope persisted. When offered the chance to become king of the new United States, he refused. When faced with the fragility of the new republic, he placed his faith in its people. His farewell address wasn't a warning of despair or a set of rules to follow, but an exhortation to trust in the experiment of democracy. A blue ring would have found a perfect host in George Washington, amplifying the light he already carried, a steady flame that inspired generations of Americans to come. And lastly,
Okay, Nelson Mandela.
represents
Yeah.
hope in endurance. For 27
Yeah, that makes
years,
sense.
Mandela was
I would've
imprisoned
picked
by
him.
South Africa's apartheid regime.
Yeah.
Nearly 3 decades in a cell would crush most people, but Mandela never let despair take root in his heart. Instead, he became a living symbol to his people, proof that even behind bars, the dream of freedom was still alive. He believed so deeply in the possibility of equality that he endured years of humiliation and isolation without ever surrendering. And the world watched. His imprisonment became a sort of rallying cry, his name whispered with reverence by those who needed a reason to believe that apartheid could be dismantled. When he was finally released in 1990, Mandela emerged hopeful. He led South Africa to a new era, dismantling apartheid and becoming its first black president. But more than his politics, it was his spirit that defined him. He preached reconciliation where others wanted revenge, optimism where others expected despair. He taught his nation that forgiveness was not weakness, but strength, that even after centuries of oppression, there could still be a brighter tomorrow. But as the blue light fades into indigo, we come to a very alien core. The indigo tribe are the strangest, most unsettling part of the emotional spectrum.
The
Unlike
indigo tribe. I wonder how you'll tackle this, cause like it's just so weird. Like what do you mean like you choose psychopaths? Like is there any category of something? Like I feel like there should be more of a category because I think you should, because like at the end you always end up like choosing like the most people who are just evil rather than someone who specifically like embodies like the indigo land, embodies like the indigo lantern or something. Like is there any category than just, being evil or lacking compassion?
The rings don't seek out people who embody compassion, the emotion of the indigo light. Instead, they hunt for the opposite, the cruelest, most heartless figures in existence. The ring then floods their mind with artificial empathy, overriding their personality, essentially brainwashing them into compassion. It's a kind of cosmic punishment, forcing the worst beings in the universe to serve others against their will. The irony is cruel but perfect. Those who never felt mercy are transformed into its slaves. Not many names carry the same weight of horror as Joseph Mengele, the German doctor remembered as the Angel of Death at Auschwitz. Mengele was one of the architects of the concentration camp's functions, turning cruelty into common procedure.
What's the difference between like the category of the indigo lantern and the category of the black lantern?
Experiments on prisoners, particularly children, subjecting them to tortures in the name of science that stripped them of humanity and treated them as tools for his grotesque curiosity. Twins were dissected, victims drowned in ice water, bodies mutilated with chemicals. Also, Mengele could make notes in his journals. If there were ever a figure devoid of compassion, it was him. And that's why the indigo light would seize him. It ensnares sadists, floods their minds with empathy until their crimes become unbearable memories, and forces them to act in service of others. For Mengele, this would be a punishment far worse than execution. Imagine the Angel of Death suddenly overwhelmed with the emotions of every child he tortured, every life he cut short. The ring would chain him to compassion, twisting his cruelty into servitude. The image is pretty poetic. The man who spent his life breaking others reduced to a vessel of healing, as a medical doctor is meant to be. That is the Indigo Way.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Idi Amin, dictator of Uganda from 1971 to 1979. He ruled through fear, violence, and grotesque excess. His regime was marked by mass executions, ethnic persecution, and economic collapse. Hundreds of thousands died under his rule, many vanishing into the shadows of his secret police. He delighted in his cruelty, publicly mocking his victims, and cultivating an image as both a buffoonish strongman and a ruthless tyrant. He adopted several absurd titles: Conqueror of the British Empire, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea.
It's cheaper on Shopee, it's faster on Shopee. Come get it.
He cloaked a reign of horror where entire communities lived in terror. A man like Amin knew no compassion. He ruled as if empathy was weakness, replacing it with brutality. And that is exactly why an indigo ring would target him. Under its control, his arrogance would shatter. Instead of laughing at the
It's so
suffering of
weird.
his
Like,
people, he would
what's
actually
the
feel
what's the
it.
category of the
Every
indigo lantern
execution,
anyways?
every widow, every child
Like,
starved through
is
his
that people who
policies
lack the
would
most
weigh on him.
compassion?
The ring would tear down the walls of his ego and force him to serve those he
Like,
once
what's the difference
oppressed.
between
A
the
man who
choosing
fancied
someone for the
himself king of
indigo
beasts
lantern and indigo lantern and choosing someone who and choosing someone who's part of the black lantern? I think I think if some being part of the black lantern, they are selfless, but the thing that they are selfless for is that it's death itself. They want people to die and suffer, and they are willing to be selfless about it. But people from the indigo lantern they're just very selfish and lack compassion.
a servant of the
Yeah,
power.
they're self-serving,
And for my
but people from the Black Lantern
last pick from the litter of emotionless monsters, I chose Pol Pot, leader of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. He presided over one of the most horrifying genocides of the 20th century. His regime sought to create an agrarian utopia by erasing all modernity, education, and urban life. In practice, this meant forced labor camps, executions, and starvation on an unimaginable scale. Intellectuals were slaughtered, cities were emptied, families were torn apart. By the time his rule collapsed, nearly 2 million Cambodians had died. Pol Pot's cruelty was not chaotic like Amin's, and it wasn't clinical like Mengele's. It was ideological. He believed so completely in his vision that he annihilated anything and anyone that didn't fit into it. That kind of cold, systematic destruction is exactly what the Indigo tribe exists to undo. A ring would end up latching onto him, crushing his ideology under the weight of empathy, and forcing him to see each death not as a statistic, but as a human life extinguished. The Indigo light would not allow him to rationalize his crimes anymore. It would force him to feel the grief of every starving child, every executed teacher, every broken family. But as we reach the end of the emotional spectrum, compassion melds into love. The violet light of love is one of the most misunderstood powers in the Lantern canon. To many, love seems like the noblest of the emotions. It's warm, gentle, uplifting, but it's actually far more complex. Love in its purest form can inspire incredible devotion, yes, but it can also consume. The violet ring amplifies.
So many pure. There's only like 2 purely good lanterns with the green and blue, but the others are more morally like ambiguous or something. And unless you count the Indigo tribe, but they brainwash their members, so I don't think that counts.
As passion until it becomes obsession. Star sapphires express all forms of love, including possessive and consuming love. Their devotion can heal wounds and create unbreakable bonds, but it can just as easily twist into jealousy, vengeance, and fixation. That duality makes love one of the most dangerous colors in the spectrum. It's why violet lanterns are sometimes saviors and sometimes villains. They represent the razor-thin line between devotion and destruction. Now, it is true, star sapphires were historically all women, but today they do allow men into their ranks, although I don't think there are any male star sapphires currently in the books. Whatever. As such, I'll be picking from both for my violet lantern choices. First up, love immortalized in stone. That is Shah Jahan's legacy. The Mughal Emperor of India is remembered
the guy
not
who
for
made
his
the Taj
conquests or his political reforms,
Taj
but
Mahal.
the monument he left behind, the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
Built as a mausoleum for his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal, who died giving birth to their 14th child. The Taj Mahal stands as one of the most iconic symbols of
that
love
makes
in the
sense.
whole world.
Like I don't really know about any pink anyone who fits the Star Sapphire core.
The obsession that was within it. His grief consumed him.
Maybe
Taj Mahal
Cleopatra.
was built as far more than some sort of building or tribute.
Mark
It was a
Antony.
grand,
I don't know, that
overwhelming
doesn't
statement
really
that
make
his
any
love
sense.
could not be forgotten for all of history. Tens of thousands of workers, decades of labor, and vast fortunes went into creating a single building, a physical construct of love, the same way a violet lantern channels their passion into light. But violet light is often a double-edged sword, and Shah Jahan's story reflects that too. His obsession with the monument drained the empire's coffers and contributed to political instability. His love was fixation.
Yeah.
Devotion became obsession, and in that, he perfectly mirrors the paradox of the violet light, capable of creating beauty that transcends time, but also of consuming everything around it. If he had a violet ring,
Yeah.
he would have raised constructs of marble and light, eternal and unyielding. His grief and his love fused into one eternal glow. Next up, Gonzalo Guerrero's story is one not of love
Gonzalo
found in a
Guerrero?
single person, but an entire people. A Spanish sailor shipwrecked on the Yucatan Peninsula in the early 16th century, Guerrero was captured by the Maya, but instead of seeking escape, he actually embraced this new people. He learned their language, took a Maya wife, and rose to become a respected warrior and leader within their community. When Spanish forces later tried to invade the peninsula, Guerrero fought against his own countrymen, defending
I mean, the
Maya who would
Mayans-
become his new family.
The Mayans literally like sacrifice people, man. I think he should be fighting alongside them. Come on.
Makes Guerrero a perfect Star Sapphire is his total devotion to his new people. Love drove him to marry into a culture foreign to him and to defend it with his life. He could have returned to his old way of living. He could have joined them when they attacked, but he chose to stand his ground for one reason. It was love for his wife, his children, and his adopted people. His transformation from Spaniard to Maya was complete, his loyalty shaped entirely by the bonds that he chose to embrace. In a way, Guerrero's violet energy is among the purest on this list. His love didn't corrode him into obsession like the others, it strengthened him, inspired him to stand against the might of his homeland. If given a sapphire ring, his constructs would be the shields of his children, the spears of his allies, the light of devotion to a people who had embraced him. His story proves that violet doesn't always twist your love into obsession. Sometimes it crystallizes it into something worth dying for. And my final pick for the Star Sapphires is actually the very first one that I thought of. Victoria, Queen
Gonzalo Guerrero was a sailor from Palos, Spain. Did he survive the battle?
Queen of the United Kingdom in the 19th century. Her devotion to Prince Albert was so profound that when he died in 1861, she fell into a grief that consumed her for the rest of her life.
Queen Victoria?
For 40 years, until her own death in 1901, Victoria, dressed in black, withdrew from public life and transformed herself into a living symbol of widowhood. The entire empire felt the weight of her loss, as her personal grief became a part of their national identity. This is the other side of the violet light.
I never thought about Victoria, to be honest.
And paralysis. Victoria's devotion to Albert never faded even a little. Every year she commemorated.
I mean, is that the reason why Victorian London is so depressing?
Every day she wore black. She kept his memory alive, not through politics or monuments, but through relentless mourning that defined an entire era for her country. If she had a violet ring, her constructs would be spectral images of Albert himself, endlessly recreated in light, surrounding her in a prison of her own devotion. And to the violet core, that's not weakness, that is power.
Yeah.
Proof that love is a force that can transcend even death.
Okay, I want to see what the
binding
Black
and defining
Lantern
a
is.
life long after the beloved is gone. But now
Like,
we've come to the end.
Okay, with Pol Pot, like, I don't really feel like he fits the Black Lantern because he actually has a goal for something, not just death. I think it's more like fixation or something. He isn't fixating on death itself, so
Of the
yeah.
emotional spectrum. Where the colored light fades, all that's left is inky blackness. The black core is powered by death itself, raising corpses and feeding on the life force of the living. Their rings recruit the dead. Black lanterns are echoes, puppets of the grave, wearing familiar faces twisted into mockeries. Where other rings channel emotions, black rings extinguish them, casting a shadow that shuts off the power of all other colored rings. To wield one is to surrender individuality, to become an instrument of entropy. When picking black lanterns, we want to choose figures that are steeped in death, surrounding themselves with it and spreading it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Figures whose legacies are built on death, whose very memory is soaked in blood.
I mean, it has to be people whose main goal is death, not just people who kill a lot, to be honest. Because, you know, if that's the case, Pol Pot will be here, but he isn't.
There are countless serial killers that would be perfect picks for this core. I'd give an honorable mention to all the notorious ones like Jack the Ripper, Bundy, Dahmer, but we'd be here all day. Let's get into my real picks. I don't think any other ruler in history embraced death as theatrically as Vlad III of Wallachia, better known as Vlad the Impaler.
No, I don't feel like
His reign in the 15th century was defined by one image: vast forests of impaled corpses.
I feel like that's supposed that feels something that comes straight from the from fear rather than death itself. Because his main goal isn't to cause death. You know, I feel like he uses death as a warning signal rather than something that he actively wants. You know, so I don't think he fits here at all.
He used death as propaganda, turning executions into a form of performance art. When Ottoman envoys arrived in his lands, they were greeted by fields of rotting bodies on spikes, a vision of terror meant to break their spirits before battle even began. Just as black lanterns do.
I feel like I also feel like Genghis Khan also does this too.
Taylor used the bodies of the dead to further his goals. The forests of corpses, a sort of preliminary army that all enemies would pass through before meeting him, breaking their wills in advance. Vlad the Impaler reveled in it, crafting his legacy through blood. His violence was so ubiquitous, it's no wonder his legend gave birth to the fictional Dracula, the archetypical undead monster that drinks life from the living.
I don't think he fits here at all.
Inspired by Vlad the Impaler. If a black ring had clawed its way from the grave onto Vlad's hand, it would have found a
this guy uses death as a means rather than something that he really wants to do, rather than an end. Because I feel like Genghis Khan also fits this criteria too, and many other rulers also fit this. It's not really particularly unique to him.
He would lead his legions of the impaled, writhing in eternal undeath. But ultimately, Vlad's killings were strategic.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Bathory made death her personal obsession.
Yeah, that's why I say it's strategic. It's not like something he wants to do. That's why Pol Pot isn't here.
The Hungarian countess of the late 16th and early 17th century is remembered, perhaps mythologized, as the Blood Countess, a woman accused of torturing and murdering hundreds of young girls. The most infamous tale, whether true or exaggerated, claims that after she killed them, she bathed in their blood to preserve her own youth. Even stripped of legend, the testimonies from her time paint her as a predator who turned cruelty into normalcy through disturbed ritual. Bathory allegedly believed blood itself could preserve her youthful beauty, that youth could be stolen from the veins of the innocent. That is death in its purest parasitic form. Her crimes represent the intimate, personal face of death. The hidden horror of locked chambers and screaming victims was her everyday. As a Black Lantern, the Blood Countess would hunt in silence, her constructs rising as spectral maidens drained of
this
color,
makes sense, to be honest.
With her with their endless decay. Her story
to be honest, there's not really a lot of people who fit the Black Lantern.
Beauty turned into rot.
Other than serial killers.
And finally, Ashurbanipal, king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire in the 7th century BC, represents the imperial face of death. His cruelty was not remembered as legend or rumor, it was carved into the stone of his own home. His palace walls were decorated with reliefs of flayed enemies, prisoners begging for mercy, and kings forced to wear chains like animals.
Yeah, this feels something. That feels something more like akin to the Yellow Lantern than something than a Black Lantern. Again, Black Lantern, and then again, he's using this for strategic and propaganda purposes rather than an actual goal of his. He's using this strategically. I don't think he fits this at all.
His house.
This
He
category-
relished in
this category is
remembering
not
the
good.
death he spread to all who opposed him, making war an art form, celebrated an imagery that glorified conquest and suffering.
I mean, a
He
lot of
wanted to see
people do that.
when he woke up every morning. The Assyrian Empire, under Ashurbanipal, was thriving on terror, reducing resistance through annihilation. He razed cities, displaced populations, and paraded death as a warning.
No, this feels like-
was the logic of the Empire. Kill, kill, kill. That was how he reminded any survivors that resistance was futile. In many ways, Ashurbanipal anticipated the Black Lantern philosophy. Life is temporary, it's fragile, it's easily extinguished. Only death is permanent. Only death is certain.
I don't think he
With the
fits-
Black
he
Ring,
fits here.
Ashurbanipal would become a general of the grave, his spectral armies drawn from the countless civilizations crushed beneath Assyrian boots. His constructs would be flayed and broken, their bodies reflecting his ruthless methods of murder, raised to fight for him once more. Black Lanterns are vile. They worship the cold silence of the grave and blot out the light of all
They
other
don't. I don't think he
lanterns.
worships
Well,
death.
except one. The White Lanterns of Life. White rings represent the entire
I know two people will fit this. Cyrus the Great and Jesus Christ. Yeah.
existence, the spark that animates every living being, the entire emotional spectrum made manifest all at once. To wield a white ring is to wield renewal, healing, and creation. While Black Lanterns reanimate corpses as grotesque puppets, White Lanterns bring true resurrection, restoring what has been lost. They are rare, exalted, and often mythic due to their multiversal levels of power. Throughout human history, certain figures seem to embody this light more than any other. They are people who nurtured, who healed, who inspired life in others. These are people who valued the tenets of freedom and renewal above all else, conquering death with their endless appreciation for and dedication to life. First, known as the Lady with the Lamp, Florence Nightingale
I mean, this was-
revolutionized the field of nursing during the Crimean War in the mid-19th
This
century.
feels very
In
like
an era
a
where
very literal
battlefield medicine
interpretation
was
of it.
primitive and
So,
conditions
you
in
know.
military hospitals were appalling, Nightingale brought order, cleanliness, and humanity. She worked tirelessly through the nights, tending to wounded soldiers by lamplight, earning their reverence and gratitude along with her nickname. She literally came to them in darkness, wielding light and healing. What makes Nightingale a White Lantern isn't simply her medical skill, but the way she infused life into places defined by death. Soldiers expected to die in agony. They found hope in her presence. Mortality rates plummeted under her reforms, all because she refused to accept that suffering was inevitable.
Yeah.
She carried life into the darkest places and refused to let it be extinguished. After the war, Nightingale became a pioneer in public health, sanitation, and hospital design, shaping the way modern medicine is practiced to this day. The White Lantern Corps is about restoration, and Nightingale wholly embodied that ethos. With the White Ring,
I mean, it's
she
like a
would
very
have spread
literal
her healing to the
interpretation of
whole
it.
world, banishing
Like
disease and despair wherever she walked.
it's like, you know,
Now-
like a very literal, like, oh, helping people not die kind of sense. Like those the two other picks I chose is more like political and spiritual, you know, but it's like a very literal interpretation of it. So it's
Now moving
preventing people from dying.
Blood-soaked fields of Crimea to the quiet neighborhood of American television, life takes many
Huh?
forms. Fred Rogers,
Oh.
host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, didn't heal wounds of the body. He healed wounds of the heart. For decades, his gentle voice and kind presence offered children a sense of safety and love in a world that often felt overwhelming. What makes Rogers a perfect White Lantern is the simplicity of his mission. Despite his incredible popularity, he never wanted fame or influence. He never used his
I don't know,
reach to
this
push
feels like very
ideological or
typical.
political messages.
This feels like a very typical pig, very like, it's like a very pop schlock type of pig, to be honest. Like, I feel like you could pick someone much more impressive than him. It's not very, but he's like a very typical, I mean, like, sure, he's kind, he's like very caring, but I feel like I feel like that should be like, you know, I feel like he doesn't really fit the bottom line of the White Lantern. I feel like you should pick someone who's more, you know, more fitting rather than him. I feel like he's like very good, he's very kind, I'm sure it's like very kind or caring, but I feel like you should pick someone who's like more deserving of it. I'm not really sure if he really deserves it, to be honest. Like, I'm not really sure if he really deserves the White Lantern. So it should be someone who's higher. Maybe I could be wrong, so I need to see more of him first.
To the millions of children who watched him, he only sought to nurture. Every episode of his show carried the same quiet message. You are loved. You are valuable. You matter. He taught generations to face their emotions, to embrace kindness, and to see the worth in themselves and others. In an entertainment industry obsessed with money and influence, Fred Rogers saw an opportunity to plant life, in the form of empathy and understanding, into young minds. The White Light is about creation, about affirming existence. Rogers embodied that.
He's
every
empathetic,
time
but
he
I
tied
don't.
his shoes,
But is
every
he
time
really healing though? Like,
he sang to the camera.
is he willing to say unpopular opinions? Because like with Jesus, like with Jesus, like he actually like flipped over tables doing. He actually like got angry, pulled up his phone, actually flipped tables. Do you think someone like Mr. Rogers is willing to do that? Is he willing to say the unpopular opinions? Say unpopular opinions? You know, is he willing to bring the hammer down? That's my question with him.
Every time he reassured a frightened child that they were not alone. If a white ring had descended into his neighborhood, it would have found a host already living out its oath. And finally, the greatest and most obvious pick, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, a figure who embodies the white light more than any other in human history. Revered as a prophet, teacher, and the Son of God, Jesus' entire life and legacy were defined by forgiveness and renewal. He healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, fed the hungry, and lifted up the poor. His teachings revolved around love, mercy, and forgiveness. He never raised his hand against an enemy, never held political office, and never owned a single plot of land. But more than 2.5 billion people today, 2,000 years later, cite him as their personal savior. That sets Jesus apart. It's not his miracles, it's his philosophy. He called on people to love their neighbors, to forgive those who wronged them, and to find value in every soul, in a world so doggedly committed to doing the opposite. And he radically taught that he could forgive sin, literally washing away the toll of death for all humanity. That is White Lantern
technically
energy
he came back to life, but you know, that's a disputed fact. I actually think he actually did come back to life, but you know, that's a different conversation.
The refusal to accept death,
altogether.
Despair, or hatred as the final word. His crucifixion, followed by his resurrection, makes him a literal embodiment of the
mentioned the
cycle of
resurrection.
life overcoming death. Every sermon, every healing, every act of compassion was like a reflection of the white light's essence. His presence ignited movements that would reshape the world, carrying life in both body and spirit. Among all figures in history, as the one who conquered death, Jesus is perhaps the purest White Lantern imaginable.
Yeah.
Stay frosty.
Yeah.
What you got to say?
Okay. I'm gonna pause for a while. I think I take a break. Yeah.